The money is going to start flowing where it belongs, and that's on the floor.
Jay, what do you see the current landscape of college basketball? Certainly on the college football side, there's been a ton of movement, all the conference realignment. I think everybody's kind of in agreement that it's not over and that 5 years from now, it probably looks very different. College basketball is being another big revenue sport. Like, what are you hearing on that front? Where do you think we're headed?
Alex, I think there are a lot of people within the structure that refer to it now as a mess or the wild, wild west or chaos. But it's really the wild, wild west that the rest of us live in. There's no salary cap for coaches. There's no spending control in any aspect of college sports, except they want a spending control with regard to players. And I think if they want that, they're going to have to bargain for it, whether they bargain for it collectively. So what's happening right now, you guys probably know this already, but for your listeners, what's happening right now is there's an antitrust suit that's been settled. And the settlement that the NCAA reached with the plaintiffs in that case, it's going before the Ninth Circuit Court, District Court, Judge Claudia Wilkins. She has to basically say, okay, I bless this settlement. It's good. Once that happens, and I think it will, it may change a little bit, but once that happens, what I think is going to happen is the NCAA is going to take that settlement to Congress and say, please give us a federal law that reflects what we've agreed to in this settlement, because they know that trying to get spending controls on athletes is going to be really difficult for them. So they want Congress to do it and preempt all these state laws so that they've got a ceiling on what they have to pay players. And look, the ceiling's right now at basically 20% of revenues, give or take, and that can be right now $20 million per school. So that's a lot of money. But it depends on how they want to dole it out. So from my perspective, that's a hell of a lot better than where we were 5 years ago, which was zero. But it's still trading one illegal wage cap for another. It's just a much bigger wage cap. But I think there's a fair chance. I don't think it's a good chance, but I think it's a fair chance that the NCAA is able to get that, especially with the results of the most recent election. I think it's possible now. I didn't think it was possible before that, but it's possible now.
How do you think that money gets broken out then? Because I think there's a complexity here. I mean, is it even amongst all sports when only 3 or 4 sports actually even create revenue, right? The two big ones being football and basketball. Does Title IX become a part of this? Do you any idea there on what that looks like?
I think it's going to be up to each school to determine what they want to do, and to some extent, it'll be up to each conference. But when you start trying to figure that part of it out, then you're going, wait a minute, if the Big Ten decides, okay, here's how we're going to dole out the money, then the SEC is going to go, we're giving it all to football and basketball. And then you're going to have the market competing, which is how it should be, frankly. Every school has to make a decision. Like, it may be even to when Shane was in school, but when I was in school in the 80s, 1980s, Duke used to trot us out to like donor events and alumni events to speak, and unpaid. But if I had gone to an event in 1986 and told all the Duke alums, hey, listen, I don't think you guys realize how good Coach K is. We've been to a Final Four and the championship game and everything, but I don't think you realize what you got here. Like, someday you're going to pay him $10 million a year. They would have said, no way. That's not what we are about. We will never do that. They would have thrown things at me for saying it. And they did it. And they were happy to do it, and they would have paid him even more to stay an extra year. Things changed drastically. But other schools look at their coach and say, look, we're not going to pay you Coach K money. We've got this. And they compete against each other. It works out just fine. So I think we'll see different schools approach it differently, and then I think it all is gonna come down to what is Congress willing to do. But the money is going to start flowing where it belongs, and that's on the floor and the field. And when we see private equity come in, and they're coming in, one of the things that I think is going to happen is when private equity decides they're going to put some capital into this, and then they're buying revenue streams, they're going to say, you don't need all these people. Like
Oh, for
you
sure.
don't need
Oh, yeah.
27 athletic
Yeah.
directors, and you don't need
Yep.
15 people doing analytics for your lacrosse program. You need to start trimming some fat here because that's cutting into our profits, and you're going to
That's
see
yeah.
college sports lean up the way professional sports has.
Well, I think that it's also like a reallocation, like you said, Jay, which is like, if we are going to have an analytics person, maybe we will put it on the sport that makes us the money because the incremental value there of moving up is worth it. I suspect this is true, but if you look at like the rise of administrative positions in hospitals, right, versus like doctors and nurses, it's crazy. It's crazy. And the same thing in education. And I would presume the same thing is true in sports. And it's like, we need to do less administrating and more playing, right? And I think that like when you have the profit motive, I do think that same thing will happen,
Yeah, I mean, it's just to me, it's been simple economics, and I've believed this from day one in this thing. Like the NCAA has been telling us for all these years that they, had this amateurism principle ruling the day that the athletes really aren't worth anything. There might be a few of them, but all the money is going to go to the quarterback, and we're going. It's going to go to the quarterback until you need somebody to protect the quarterback, and then it's going to go to some offensive linemen and some wide receivers because somebody's got to catch the ball. It's not even though the quarterback is the most important position in the NFL and makes the most money, it's not like the other guys are playing for free. There's value there, and we're seeing that now, and we're going to see it in other sports. And it's going to depend on what these schools value most, and all of them value football most, and then basketball after that. But the SEC is making money in baseball now. That's going to continue to grow. And there are all kinds of revenue streams in college athletics that haven't been tapped into yet, and they're going to figure out a way to tap into them.
Do you think the gambling is going to come in the same way that
Yes.
it's come in the pros? I think so too. And then, what's interesting is I'm like a very much like a markets person. I will tell you, I feel kind of conflicted on the gambling thing because I intellectually like, look, you should make it available, and everyone is an adult, and we have rules and all of that stuff. I do think that like, but not intellectually, just sort of like behaviorally, it's so addicting, and I do think there was some value to having some friction in it at some point. And so I'm curious from your standpoint, like where do you land on like its role in sports, and particularly as we go to college sports?
Generally, I don't care for the idea of gambling being part of that space. But if the colleges who claim to be in loco parentis to all these students, if they're willing to do deals with these sort of gambling entities, it really tells you kind of what they're about first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it the way I do alcohol. Like I think alcohol sales are fine, but it needs to be controlled in a certain way. The one thing I'll tell you, Robbie, that I think is really interesting is the NCAA is planting a flag with prop betting right now. Charlie Baker, the new NCAA president, gave a presentation to our ESPN basketball group recently, and he was very passionate about wanting to get prop betting out of college sports. That he sees it as being really dangerous and really unhealthy for athletes. That they get so much vitriol through social
Yeah.
media and
Totally.
threats and all
Yeah.
that. And I think that's a fair point.
Yep.
And I actually am supportive of that initiative.
I
But
hope he's successful.
I think they have a very good opportunity of being successful with that, especially with state governments and the federal government. I do think it's a larger hill to climb to think that you're going to eliminate gambling on college sports. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Heck, I mean, I'm sure we all do certain things with fantasy leagues and a football pool with your buddies or stuff like that I would not call unhealthy.
Yeah.
But I'm not as worried about sort of the point shaving thing that the NCAA has been talking about for decades now because Vegas is so good at sniffing that stuff out. I don't think it's a
No, I'm
major
worried
problem.
about DMs on social media. You
Yeah.
cost me my parlay. I think I'm worried about that. Same thing. And I'm worried about people coming to the game and not watching the game, but watching their phones to see if the person hits the stat or not.
Yeah, well, that's going to happen no matter what because now whether prop betting goes hitting a particular shot, But these games now are, when I was growing up, you went to the game to watch the game, and when you watch television, you watch the game. Now now it's about a complete fan experience. So all these new arenas, they've got areas where you don't even sit and watch the game. You're sitting in a bar and eating while the game's going on. The game's kind of a backdrop. So they're just trying to capture all these different revenue streams from this stuff, and that's going to continue. The fan experience is going to be totally different in the future than it is now.
Jay, how do you feel that you're the guy? Like we talk about identity a lot with our guests and on the show, and like you have to expect whenever you go play golf with a new foursome, you're going to get the question, "What's going on in NIL? Where is it going? What's your opinion?" And you become Mr. NCAA, Mr. NIL, and like, does that ever like get heavy? Do you ever say, "No, I don't want to talk about college basketball today"? I just want to golf. And we find different responses from our guests who will talk about the subject, to the cows come home. And some days it's like, no, I don't want to be that person. And so, do you think about that?
I have no problem with it. I'll talk about this all day long with anybody. Like I tend to be able to separate things pretty easily. So when I go to a game to broadcast a game, I'm enjoying every bit of it. The game itself, the pageantry around it, the atmospheres. Like I was just in Allen Fieldhouse recently, and I was like, I loved every second of it. I'm not walking in there going, "These guys deserve to be paid." This NCAA, I don't worry about that stuff. But when it's time to talk about policy, I'm not talking about basketball or golf. We'll talk about policy. But when people want to talk about it, they're genuinely interested, and I really kind of enjoy that, and I learn stuff. You kind of learn people's perspectives. Like it's funny you asked that question. Like about a year ago, I played golf with a good friend of mine who's a big financial guy and has always been really generous with his school, and he said, "You know what? As soon as we go to paying the players directly, I'm out. Like I'm not doing this." He just had a completely different perspective than I did, and I really respected that. I mean, I certainly wasn't trying to talk him out of it, but it was really helpful for me to hear that and to hear where people are and how they view it. We may differ. We're still great friends. It doesn't matter, but I really enjoy talking about it. Same thing with this may not pertain to the question specifically, but I always kind of laugh when people say, does it ever bother you when people come up to you at airports or stuff like that? And I'm like, no, it's fantastic. Like it's so much better than walking through an airport completely anonymous. Like I've met so many nice people that way. And I love it. Now, I'm not saying I want to have when I'm sitting on the plane trying to do some work or watch a movie that I want, I want somebody, hey, say, take your earbuds out. I want to talk about NIL. Not always, but 99% of the time, it's nothing but good.